Hello, it's Caitlin Jenkins, the family law vlogger here, and today's vlog answers the question, what is a private FDR? So for context, a private FDR we're talking about in the context of a couple who are married trying to sort out their finances on divorce. Now, an FDR is part of the court process for doing that if a couple are going through the court process. There are various other vlogs about the stages of divorce, but in headline terms, when people are getting divorced and using the courts to help resolve the finances, there's an early stage, which is the sort of stage one, which is the information gathering stage, trying to understand and get a clear picture of what the assets are, what they're worth, getting any valuation evidence in or professional expertise evidence in, like valuations or information about pensions, so that by the end of stage one, you've got a clear idea of what there is. Stage two in the court process would lead to a court FDR. FDR stands for Financial Dispute Resolution Hearing. So in the context of a court, the FDR would take place, and at that hearing, if it was being heard in the court context, there would be usually a district judge or a high court judge who would be allocated to listen to the offers that both of the couple have made, to understand why each of them think that the proposal for the overall financial settlement that they have put forward is the right one, and then to work with the couple across a period of time during a court day, possibly only an hour or so, to try and help give an indication around what sort of decision a judge would make if they were actually deciding the case at a final hearing, at the third stage, if an agreement can't be reached. So the judge at the FDR will understand what offers have been made, understand the rationale, and then will be invited to give their view off the cuff on that day about where they think the outcome answer could be financially, often somewhere between the positions of either of the parties or erring towards one side or another, if they were hearing the overall decision. Now, that judge can't impose that outcome on that day. It's a negotiation hearing. The idea of it is to encourage the parties to go out of the courtroom, try and negotiate and come up with an agreement that can be reached. And if the parties can do that, then the judge in the court context can approve that agreement that day or when documents are filed thereafter. But if the couple can't agree what the overall outcome should be on that day, then the judge can't impose the outcome. It can simply list the case for the further stage, the final stage of the final hearing, at which a different judge, not the one who's heard the offers, would then impose an outcome. So that's a court FDR. So what's a private FDR? Well, it's the same context, but it's just instead of using the court process and a publicly paid, within the confines of a court, judge, it's instead taking that negotiation process away from the formal court context and doing it in a private environment. So that usually means, instead of a judge paid through the court service, that the couple agree to have a private FDR where they instruct usually either a senior solicitor who's experienced in these matters or a barrister or sometimes a retired judge to perform the role of an FDR judge as they would do in a court context. So what actually happens is, in a private FDR, usually a day is set aside. The parties and their advisors, solicitors and or barristers, would turn up. They would have provided the private FDR judge, this solicitor or barrister, with all the paperwork, all the offers, exactly the same information that a judge in a court context would have had. And that solicitor or barrister, the private FDR judge, will give some thought to it and give a detailed indication as to what they think the outcome would be if they were sitting as the judge. So it's the same as a court FDR, but there are certain advantages. First of all, you can choose your private FDR judge. So you can choose somebody, and both parties have to agree who it is, but you could choose somebody that you know has particular expertise in, say, some of the nuances of your case. So say, for example, there's a business owner in the case, or there's a farm, or there's complex trusts, or all sorts of different complicating factors. Then the couple could decide with their advisors to choose a private FDR judge that they know understands those areas. Whereas in a court context, you get the judge that you're given on that day, who may or may not have that expertise. The second thing is, a private FDR, the judges and the parties set aside a lot more time. A private FDR is usually, it takes place across a whole working day from, say, 10 in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. There is a lot more time, both for the private FDR judge to consider the papers and actually be able to give a really thoughtful, reasoned, detailed view on what they think an answer should be, compared to the situation with a judge in a court context, where they might literally have possibly 20 minutes to read the papers and an hour to hear the situation and give a view. It's much more off the cuff. Much less thought is able to go into it from a judge in a court context than you get from a private FDR judge. And then the other thing a private FDR does, because it's set aside for a whole day, is it gives the parties more time and in a nicer environment to negotiate and really work hard with their advisors to try and find an outcome. It's in a nicer environment because usually, instead of standing around in the corridors of a very busy court, as you would in a court FDR, the private FDR is held in either a solicitor's offices or a barrister's chambers, and so space is set aside. There's more time, there's more breaks, there's the ability to think without being put under pressure because of the time pressures in a judge. Now, because the private FDR is before somebody who isn't sitting as a court judge, if an agreement is reached at the private FDR judge can't approve that agreement there and then. They can approve the concept of what has been done, and they can agree how that's going to be documented and make sure that then goes into the court for approval, but you can't get the approval there and then that day. But that's a tiny little nuance. In the vast majority of cases that have a private FDR as opposed to a court FDR, an agreement is reached if that's going to be possible. It's also, clients tell us, a much more reasonable, comfortable experience. Nobody wants to be sitting in an office negotiating about their finances with their soon-to-be former spouse. But in the context of having to get a resolution, doing it through a private FDR is often a better process, most people find. The costs? Well, the FDR process itself, having this negotiation hearing, whether it's through a court or whether it's through privately through a private FDR, are broadly about the same. It saves a couple of things. One, you pay for your private FDR judge. You pay that equally. It tends to be a few £1,000s, depends on the type of case, etc., as to the costings. But it's not enormous in the context of what the costs can be if you don't manage to reach an agreement. And secondly, private FDRs tend to be successful. Not always. There are always cases that don't settle, whatever the FDR per structure, and go to a final hearing. But more cases do settle at private FDRs than at judge-led FDRs in the court context, just because of the amount of time available. And so that has a cost saving. So that then is an overview of what an FDR and in fact a private FDR is. But as always, the vlog can only give general information. So if you have specific questions about your circumstances, then please do contact me or one of the members of the Mills & Reeve Family and Children team, and we'll be able to advise you. Thank you.